The idea that these platforms don't talk to each other is an issue, and that's the issue that identity graphs can solve. The thing in business is I find a very underrated part of the identity graph process is actually taking a step back from the tech and looking at the business use cases first. When you stitch all of these three data points together, it can tell you so much about an individual, even down to the fact that I had bought pink pajamas. So most likely it's a girl, right? That's basically what an identity graph is. It's tying together these different data sets into one database that makes sense of a single identity. You want to do that over and over and over again to be able to get a scalable identity graph. Deterministic matching is what forms the spine of your identity graph, right? It's an email ID. It's a device ID. It's something that's a persistent identifier that you can build against.
Yeah. Hi, Steven.
Hi.
How are you? How's it going?
I'm good. How are you?
Great. Welcome to Below the Fold, episode 8.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Before I ask you, welcome. Before I ask
Thanks.
you about yourself and ask you to introduce yourself, what do you think about the name of the show?
I like it.
Can you see the link with digital marketing?
So yeah, Below the Fold has always been something that's heavily discussed, right? Things that are maybe not seen as often.
Right.
Yeah, and I think this is a look under the hood of the industry. That's how I read it anyway.
Yeah. Well, spot on. It's also this above the fold, below the fold, endless dilemma, right? Should your ads appear above or below, or does it matter if it's targeted?
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah, true.
But I like your analogy as well.
Thanks.
Great. So tell us a bit about yourself. Give us an introduction.
Yeah, so I'm a GCC kid. I was born and raised in Saudi. Lived in the region most of my life, in Dubai for 15 years. And for the past 15 years, I've been doing a bunch of stuff. The first thing I did is actually, I thought I could open my own company here in the UAE. That lasted around a year. I wound up shutting down. Yeah.
Okay.
And entering the world of digital, because during that year I had my company, but I was also building out things like websites and getting more into digital myself.
Right.
And when I started to enter the industry, I found out that digital marketing just kind of scratches the surface of it.
Yeah.
So I started to get more and more into MarTech, more into digital transformation, business processes. So my career evolved from having kind of surface level digital media interaction to actually getting further into businesses and understanding how it impacts them as well.
Yeah. Fascinating. So which year did you start in working in digital? Just so that I know, was it banners or was it search or was it social media? Because we both know it evolved,
so
right? A lot
very
in
true.
the past 2 decades, I suppose.
Very, very true. Around 2009, something like that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. 2009. We're talking like
you're talking standard banners. Give me a roadblock, homepage takeover, all that good stuff.
Fixed buys, weekly bookings, sub 10% budget spend, right? Budget share.
True.
Wow.
And you have to explain it. It's like a magazine, but it's online.
Right. Yeah. It's online. People are spending time online.
Exactly.
Wow. Look where we started and look where we are today.
Yeah.
And today we're here to talk about identity graph.
Yeah.
Which is a long way from online magazines and a weekly booking.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us or explain to us or to the viewers and listeners what is a digital identity graph?
Sure. So the easiest way to explain it is actually through a small story of mine. A few years ago, I was sitting down with a client and they were talking about creating some type of a workshop for digital. I was like, how am I going to start this workshop? Well, actually, the foundation of good digital is data.
Right.
So I created 3 different slides to kind of kick off the session. On the first slide, I had basically an identity that was downloaded from Amazon. Second slide, an identity that was downloaded from Meta. And third slide, an identity that was downloaded from Google.
Right.
All of these have an identity graph in their own right. But if you really wanted to tell a story, understand the customer a lot better, you'd want to tie all of these 3 together, right? So on Amazon, this person actually had bought diapers, they had bought pink pajamas, and on Meta, they had logged in using Meta's login to digital media courses. And then aside from that, on Meta, they had also, followed things like gaming laptops, stuff like that. And then on Google, they were looking for shows to watch on Netflix, bigger houses in Dubai. So what do you think? Who's this person? Who could that be? If you roll up that identity and you wanted to tell a story about this individual, who could it be? What could you tell about them?
I mean, with all the data points that you shared, it feels like it's a new parent, work from home, wannabe, online digital business,
100%.
Ambition,
Yeah.
brewing.
Yeah.
Am I right?
You're right. So actually, this person was me. Like, we had just delivered our first baby girl, and we were like, okay. I'm gonna be up at 3 a.m. I'm gonna be watching Turn on Netflix. That was the show that I found out.
Right.
I had night shifts. Right. I need a bigger house. A new baby means a new room. So when you stitch all of these 3 data points together, it can tell you so much about an individual, even down to the fact that I had bought pink pajamas. So most likely it's a girl, right?
Right.
So if I'm a new dad, what would you do as a business? What would you communicate to me? What would you try and sell me? What would you try and, extract value from this data set? Right. That's basically what an identity graph is. It's tying together these different data sets into one database that makes sense of a single identity. And you want to do that over and over and over again to be able to get a scalable identity graph.
Right. And how important is that with the fact that there are multiple platforms, each a walled garden, right?
Very true.
Not able to, with the challenge that come with not being able to stitch the data together from these different platforms or walled gardens.
Very, very true. The industry is actually heading in this direction. Like for years, we've had these walled gardens in place. They've created a little bit of stress, for lack of a better word, from a digital media perspective. Yeah. So if I'm running a YouTube ad and a Meta ad at the same time, how am I not overexposing my audience? How am I just making sure that I'm actually taking them through this entire CX loop and not repeating messaging? So the idea that these platforms don't talk to each other is an issue. And that's the issue that identity graphs can solve. Like you have to find smart ways for these platforms to actually share back maybe unknown identifiers. Yeah. And maybe on your site, they can become known identifiers. Or on your app, they can become known identifiers. So let's say, I'm going to give you a very basic example. Someone clicks through from a Meta ad, right? They land on your website. You get this beautiful UTM parameter. You get session ID. You get all of that good stuff. And then they basically, maybe through Facebook login, access your site, buy something off of it. All of a sudden, you've taken a Meta identity and you've been able to resolve it back into your own platform.
Right.
So now you're starting to stitch together unknown and known data sets.
Right. So you need this unique identifier as a sort of a common denominator.
True.
For this ID's behavior outside.
100%.
Right. Outside your site.
100%.
Or your assets. So could we talk about what are components and building blocks in order to put this together?
Yeah.
So obviously you need a piece of MarTech, right? Or tech.
True.
Yeah.
So the thing in business is I find a very underrated part of the identity graph process is actually taking a step back from the tech and looking at the business use cases first.
Okay.
Right? You have to get someone who's fluent in business and fluent in data. They're a rare breed out there. They're not very common. So when you get this person, they'll start running a discovery session for your organization. They'll start to understand when and where you collect data, what you want to do with this data, and how you're going to extract business value. That's the first part of the process. And when you start to understand those 3 things, you start to design use cases around the data. Mm-hmm. You start to design roadmaps around the data. So once you're done with that, then you can start getting into the components. Okay, how am I going to ingest this data? And after I ingest this data, what do I need to do with it? Am I missing any of the components? Do I need to go out and get some data partnerships? Do I need to get some MarTech to help me unlock these data sets that I don't have access to? Yeah. So it's always best to start this process or to start the building blocks from actually the business needs and work backwards into the tech that you're actually wanting to utilize. And from a tech perspective, CDPs could have multiple ID graphs that they stitch together. You could do it in data lakes. There's so many different technologies out there, and I can talk about them till the cows come home. And all of them play a role in identity resolution, right?
Yeah.
But for me, the most important building block is a good session with the business to understand what everyone needs.
Right. So I guess it is important to step back and really understand and evaluate whether you do really need to go further down and see if you need data, if you need to stitch data together, right? If there is a business case, if the investment that you will follow in order to acquire that data is worthwhile. Will it generate a sort of a positive return, right? In a lot of cases, we may see marketeers that are venturing into this area, into the space, because it's innovative and it's compelling, but there's no real business use case. There's no real opportunity to go down that route,
You're very spot on. I used to have a client who's also a friend of mine, and he was like, I don't want to be inundated with data. Let's not do data for the sake of data. Let's do data for the sake of business, right? And it could be for better customer retention. It could be for better personalization. There's multiple ways to think about it, but the use cases will always be uncovered from the business side of things. And I think some of the use cases will be quite surprising. We'll cover them later on in the session, but yeah.
Okay. I'm excited for that. Great. I'm excited that you brought some use cases. So yeah, I mean, I think maybe we can spend a little bit more time to talk about the purpose and importance. I think we touched on it a little bit now. And I believe also definitely the importance is because of these challenges with walled gardens, being able to stitch, the different behaviors together down to one single user, right? To have a single view of the end user.
True. From a purpose and importance perspective, I mean, there's multiple angles that you can look at it from, right? Media and marketing is one side of things, but also what about looking at things like business processes?
Yeah.
Today, I'm not going to name the car brand, but there was a car brand that went into this very long R&D cycle to create heated seats.
Okay.
And those heated seats were actually a subscription model. So you had a connected car environment, you had an app, and if you wanted certain features in the vehicle itself, you had to subscribe to them. So the manufacturer actually put in the parts, but you couldn't activate the parts unless you subscribed.
Wait, let me just stop you there for a second. Is this an electric car or a regular petrol car?
Well, they have both.
They have both.
Are we narrowing it down a little bit?
But for the specific car, is it for both?
It was this subscription model was for both, right?
Okay, interesting. Yeah.
And if you look at an identity graph and the type of data that you have, right, and with connected cars, taking a step back and actually understanding if that's a business use case that you actually need from it. Like, what type of data can you collect from a heated seat, or let's say what type of data can you collect from a subscription model of actual components of the vehicle, and is that actually something that the customer experience will benefit from? And that's the purpose of it, right? It's actually validating parts of R&D and parts of the customer experience before you actually put that out.
Right.
A good identity graph can actually help you predict what type of features you should be, implementing in your product, where you should be investing your money. Even if you were to look at a business like Amazon as another example.
Yeah.
So people go out and shop from Amazon, and Amazon obviously has all of these warehouses and networks of warehouses, right?
Yeah.
If they notice a certain district is ordering more of a particular good, then that's a pattern that an identity graph can actually fuel.
Yeah.
And they can actually stock up on that product in the area.
Right.
The crux of an identity graph can be a household, right? It can be a particular address. It can be a district. And then you can actually have a hierarchy that goes down into, okay, these are the people in the household. This is what they're interested in. This is how they're shopping. And you can have all of these attributes as part of that hierarchy.
Right. So, but why can't you just rely on your first party data in order to identify those opportunities or the insights? Why do you need to combine your data with other sources through an identity graph?
Yeah, good question. So the data that you'll have about a customer is never as scalable as you'd like it to be. It'll always have gaps. And from a gap perspective, the question is, how do you fill those gaps, right? So today, if you wanted to be able to run some type of predictive analytics and understand, what could the future look like for this customer, and how can I evolve my relationship with this customer? The data you have is all historical data.
Yeah.
It's nothing that you can actually model to actually look at some type of future interaction. And that's where you need to go out of your own business, right? I'll give you an example. Let's say you're a QSR, and that particular QSR has a loyalty app, right? And you go out and you start shopping for XYZ. You have a certain pattern of buying, kids meals or whatever the product is.
Yeah.
And then over time, you start to notice that these loyalists that used to buy kids meals have disappeared from your business.
Yeah.
And if you're relying on your own data, you'll never know why they disappeared. But if you look at a partner's data, you might find out, oh, wait, these guys are actually going to a competitor now.
Yeah,
although
like a new QSR restaurant.
A new QSR restaurant, something with more kid-friendly activities. And that's where you need data partners to help you understand, if the customer isn't talking to you, what are they actually looking for?
Right, okay. And what is their particular individual needs and I guess sensitive points that is making them, triggering them to move to the other brand.
100%.
QSR. This is why it's important to have this information down to a single ID.
Yeah.
Right? To an identity
graph. 100%. Yeah.
So there's a lot of data integration required, and I'm guessing there's also a sort of a matching algorithm, right, or methodology that is utilized in order to match those different IDs. How accurate are these algorithms? What are factors that one needs to take into account when utilizing these algorithms?
Good question. So there's basically two types of methodologies for matching. There's deterministic matching and there's probabilistic matching. Deterministic matching is what forms the spine of your identity graph, right? It's an email ID. It's a device ID. It's something that's a persistent identifier that you can build against.
Yeah.
But then you have so many signals and so many data streams that come in as unidentified. And that unidentified data stream, although I know cookies are being deprecated, it could be a cookie. It could be a session ID. It could be a click ID. And all of these are against probabilistic type of identifiers where you're not certain who this person is. So you start to take a little bit of a deeper step into these, like what is associated with that click ID? Is it a certain screen resolution? Is it an operating system? Is it a device brand or type? And you start to see, okay, this click ID had these identifiers, a certain screen resolution, a certain connection type, operating system.
Yeah.
And I also found this click ID over here that had the same identifiers against it. So probabilistically, those two devices might be the same person. So let me match them.
Right.
Now, what's the pitfall of actually matching them is you're not certain that it's the actual same person. So this is an iterative process, right? And you can approach it in many different ways. Once you start to get more data against this probabilistic match, it might become more and more valid over time because, it was basically this person. I marketed to them a similar item to what they clicked on and they purchased it. Okay, that's some form of validation. But you can even take different approaches. You can even create a validation type of an approach. So against this probabilistic match, you can ask them, like, let's say you're looking at someone who visited a car dealership. Have you visited a car dealership in the last 7 days? You're sending them a survey, and if they tell you yes, and your identifier has told you yes, then you're good, right? Because you've created some type of validation.
Right.
Those are the two types of matchings. Now, what is the potential pitfall of probabilistic matching? Is that yes, it comes with scale, and yes, it's a lot larger than deterministic matching. But if you build your entire strategy against it, you're leaving a lot of value on the table.
Yeah. How much would you say is the split like between deterministic and probabilistic? I think it would depend on the industry and
it would definitely depend on the industry,
the sector, and the audience.
Yeah, but a good ID graph, what it will do is always deterministic is going to be much smaller, right? In terms of scale and size. A good ID graph over time will aim to merge in the probabilistic models to a deterministic match. And although it's much smaller in scale, probabilistic gives you that additional scale and that additional enrichment of that ID.
Yeah, but you can also apply a filter to probabilistic. Like you can, I guess, single out high probabilistic segments as opposed to low probabilistic based on parameters that you can control or that you can define. Like, for example, frequency of visiting a certain website as opposed to have visited once in the past month.
100%.
Right, and or the level of intent, for example, or other signals maybe, that help identify this as a high probable, or high probability, right?
Absolutely.
And I guess this way you can help increase the accuracy of the data. You also mentioned running surveys, right? Asking users certain questions and based on their answer, collecting that data. But that becomes deterministic.
That becomes a validation of probabilistic.
Right.
Unless you're actually collecting PII against it. So I have this set of probabilistic data, and I want to turn it into a deterministic match.
Right.
I've served it on a mobile device, and so I've been able to capture IDFA, and I was able to use the IDFA, for example, to match back to a deterministic match. Or if I left it probabilistic and I took a small subset of the sample, right? I want to take, I don't know, a statistically significant 10% of my sample. And I want to survey them and I want to understand. That's probably going to be, from a cost perspective and ROI perspective, as a much more cost-effective and scalable exercise versus trying to resolve everyone's identity.
Right.
So that's the consideration that you need to take when looking at probabilistic.
Yeah. But at least it's scalable. And back again to this methodology of running a survey and asking people to, provide their answer, and based on that, building out that audience. Doesn't the industry refer to that as zero-party audiences? Am I correct?
Yeah, so a little bit of zero-party data layered on top of a probabilistic model. Yes, it's a way for you to create a validation off of that.
Right.
Because sometimes, let's take location data as an example, right? If someone's visiting a boutique inside a mall, there's no way to actually isolate what floor they're on here in the UAE, or let's say in the GCC in general. In the US and in Europe, there are ways to do it. But here, you resort to zero-party data. You resort to a validator. Like, okay, from these 10,000 people or these 10,000 identifiers that I saw visited a boutique, what is my accuracy? Is it 80%? Is it 90%? That goes back to your confidence level of probabilistic.
Yeah. So how do you identify who's visited your boutique from this 10,000?
You use location data, right? And that validator. So that's a way for an identity graph to also be built out, right? And if you wanted to actually add another deterministic layer, maybe you have a loyalty program, and maybe the same device ID redeemed some points or earned some points inside the boutique. Then you have a deterministic match, right? I saw this device ID in location X, plus they earned some points in my store, same timestamp. Great, I've done a match, and I've added that to my identity graph.
Right. Timestamp. I keep hearing timestamp recently.
Yeah.
I feel like timestamp is becoming an important data point to match different data together, right, from different sources.
It's a probabilistic identifier, so it can be valuable. It can be very valuable.
What are other probabilistic identifiers?
It could be IP address, it could be device type, screen resolution, connection type. It could be, for example, location, if it's passed back, what district they actually access the internet from or access the particular page from.
Yeah.
There's a lot of different identifiers that could be used in probabilistic matching.
Right. So awesome. Let's talk a little bit about adoption of this tech.
Yeah.
Right. Or of identity graph.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe applications, right? Also use cases, marketing use cases.
Sure.
How do you feel first from an overall perspective in the region? Are we doing in terms of adopting or utilizing identity graph?
Yeah, I think we could do a lot more. I think we could really do a lot more. It's an underrated topic, right? And I think you've done 3 podcasts that I can remember that I personally watched. One was about performance. Another one was about Gen Z. And the third one was about marketing automation and this type of stuff. The foundation of all of those is actually an identity graph, right?
Yeah.
And how many people have actually got their identity graph right and created an identity graph that's relevant to their business here in the region? If I'm, let's say, a conglomerate, right? And I have a bunch of different types of stores. One of them is kitchen utensils. Another one sells products for kids. And another one has, F&B, restaurants. I want to see what type of cross-selling I've had and what type of success I've had from a ID perspective, right?
Yeah.
And if I look at that in the region, how good these businesses that are conglomerates are cross-selling these other parts of their businesses and how well they're actually using that for progressive profiling, I haven't seen a great example as of yet.
Yeah.
One that's my personal favorite, I would say maybe Emirates. Emirates has done a good job. Like you'll if you're a gold member, you'll book a ticket. Great. You'll wind up at the airport. You'll sit down. The second you're seated in the plane, one of the stewardesses will come and greet you because you're a gold member. They'll use it from a customer experience perspective to make you feel a little bit more personal, a little bit warmer. But there's much more sophisticated use cases that you can actually build off of this. And this is maybe an example of an identity graph being taken too far, but Target in the US, they actually had something called, I believe it was a baby score or something. So if you bought a bag that was larger than the usual bags that you buy as a woman, right?
Yeah.
And technically it could double as let's say a diaper bag.
Right.
And let's say you've bought calcium and zinc and magnesium supplements. And let's say you bought like a Blue Runner and a whole bunch of stuff that, don't say I'm having a baby, but those purchases basically, have a baby score attached.
Right.
And ultimately what Target was using to do with these is send coupons for baby items off of the back of these types of purchases.
Right. Okay.
It was a very early stage, right?
Yeah.
And a story actually happened where someone was living in a household with their father and they received in the mail some coupons from Target for baby stuff. And the father was furious. Why are you sending this to my daughter? And he called up the store manager and, he had a whole fight with the store manager. And then a month later, he calls back the store manager saying, sorry, my daughter actually is pregnant. So
oh, wow.
Target actually knew what was going on in the household using the identity graph before the actual household.
Right. So based off the customer's interaction, they were able to I guess flesh out how likely the customer is having a baby. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Or they were able to indicate, or I guess generate indications on the likelihood. Yeah. But from the example that you gave me, it seems that they went far beyond from how the daughter shopped at Target. Yeah. Right. I guess they've identified other patterns as well. Yeah. And I think this is where the value of identity graph kicks in, is how what patterns can you see outside of your ecosystem, or what you have visibility on, maybe.
100%. 100%.
You know, you're able to identify these behaviors or predict that someone is having a baby.
100%. So let's say I'm Target, right? I have this shopping behavior, and I want to bring in other components to validate my baby score.
Yeah.
I'd go out to third-party providers, maybe, you know, someone who has a website that actually has, you know, stuff of how to prepare for a baby.
Exactly.
Or maybe, you know, I'm going out and talking to a data broker who maybe has some information about, you know, apps related to also, I'm going to be very graphic, menstrual cycles.
Right.
I'm comfortable saying that because I've worked on brands that actually manage those things.
That's fine. Yeah.
But yeah, once you have that type of data and you start to match it together with shopping behavior, you can actually have a pretty high level of confidence.
Or you use location intelligence or location data partners and take on visits to a doctor or to a gynecologist, right?
It could be. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of use cases, and 100%. now I'm starting to feel how important is this discovery session, right? To uncover what could be potential data partners that probably will add value, right? Haven't you sat down and thought about those? Maybe you wouldn't have felt the opportunity to invest, right, in an identity graph.
True.
I really like this example.
The Target example.
Yeah, I hope not a lot of fathers experience, you know, a surprise of their daughters being pregnant. From receiving coupons from Target. But yeah.
On the upside, he's going to be a granddad, right?
On the upside, on the right side. Any influential factors that are worthy of calling out for identity graph? Like, what are technological advancements that are expected to shape identity graph or the future of identity graphs?
So this is going to sound a little bit cliche because it's been around for quite a while, but the Internet of Things, right? I mean, today your cars are more connected. Your toothbrush is connected. Your mobile phone is always with you 24/7. And we as humans, the more and more we enter the Internet of Things or the Internet of everything, I think these are going to give us new signals to attach to an identity graph. So it becomes that much deeper. Now, obviously, there's privacy concerns that come attached. There's consent that comes attached to all of this. So the way we navigate it from a future perspective is really important. But if I'm an automotive manufacturer, right, and I've got 50,000 vehicles on the road, and I have telematics from the vehicle, and it's telling me, you know, you have these 3 models and around 5,000 vehicles that have 20% or 50% brake wear, right? In the next few months, they might come in and want to change their brakes. So if I'm an automotive manufacturer, I can start to forecast revenue off of that. I can forecast inventory. There's been a lot of scenarios where you might over order and then, you know, have to do a fire sale on the parts. Or let's say you're not planning your staffing or your mechanics properly, and they wind up having a poor experience, long wait times. From an identity graph perspective, you know, attaching new data sources that typically or historically weren't there start to add a lot of value for businesses as well. And, you know, off of the back of that, in-vehicle notifications, new channel to also communicate on, or in-app, if they have their phone in their hand, hey, you know, your brake wear is at 50%, consider going in, getting them checked, making sure everything's okay. You know, all of these things can start to play into also new comms channels as well.
I love how you mentioned an example for logistics improvement and also for customer experience improvement at the same time. So identity graph is not here to only solve marketing challenges. It's also here to solve a lot of other areas as well, such as logistics, supply chain, customer experience. There are a lot of applications,
100%,
right, for identity graph.
And this is where having that conversation with the business before you actually design an identity graph is so important, because it does impact every part of your business if you're a customer-centric organization, which I hope in this day and age more and more organizations are thinking that way.
Okay. Having conversations, with the business before you even think about marketing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Fantastic. And speaking of marketing,
yes,
a little bit in more details, I guess.
Yes.
Again, what do you feel are elements that can help accelerate adoption identity graph in marketing?
Yeah.
Or would slow it down?
Yeah. So I feel like, I don't know if you've experienced the same thing, but in recent years, we've had so many conversations about targeting, attribution, and measurement from a post-campaign perspective. And you look at some of the industries that you're having these conversations with, right? Let's say you're dealing with an FMCG or a CPG.
Yeah.
Most of the time in the region, these folks don't even have access to their own data. They rely on a third party to give them aggregated sales, right? And that happens after the fact. And when you have data that has slow velocity, you're actually missing out on opportunities to optimize or actually make your campaign better. So if you think from a context of an identity graph, okay, let's say I used a particular identity graph to market. How do I validate that, let's say, this consideration campaign actually drove X amount of sales in a retailer that I have no data partnership with, maybe, that I have, let's say, no access to actually validate any types of sales figures from, apart from something that's going to come a month down the line. And at the same time, I have to run an MMM, which is going to take a few months to actually validate the ROI of this activity. So if I'm sitting in CPG, I start to think about, okay, how can I tie this back to a purchase, right? Maybe I create a loyalty app. Maybe I have some quid pro quo going on with the actual customer. So at least I have a sample of folks that are buying my brand that I can collect. Great. Now I have a little bit of a loyalty program. I have redemptions. I know if person X bought it from supermarket Y or supermarket Z. So I also know where these people shop.
Right.
Now the next level of questions, right? FMCGs usually field products in different categories, right? What is your share of wallet in the different categories? What's your penetration of these different types of products? If I'm buying toothpaste, am I also buying shower gel? Am I also buying baking paper, whatever it is, right? That the FMCG is selling. So these types of kind of identity graphs can help solve part of the problem. And then when you start to actually fuel your media with that, you actually know, okay, I ran a meta campaign with device ID X, right? Yeah. Someone wound up in supermarket Y and actually redeemed something with my loyalty app. Yeah. Oh, I have a matching identifier because I have device ID here and device ID here. Let's take it back. Let's match it back together. So I know that my meta campaign was maybe one of the things that drove a conversion. Now, I know consumer journeys are much more complicated than that, but that's a simplistic example of how we can start to solve industry problems.
Right. And this is where you need to have a sort of an agreement or alignment on the attribution model that you want to follow. Last click, last video viewed, and then maybe also you can assign different weights, right, depending on the channels that this customer has been engaging with, right?
100%. And back to your point, like meta to a purchase is just a very simplistic example. But if we wanted to design a customer journey, right? And maybe video was the first thing that they saw, then maybe a carousel, and then maybe they searched something, and then maybe they went and bought, right? So now I've got 3 channels that are tied to the identity graph, and I know that's the path to purchase for product X, right? Now what's the path to cross-sell or to get them to buy another product from me? That's where the loyalty communication comes into play. And that's when you're able to also look at, okay, what is my email marketing doing? What is my push notification doing? You know, all of these types of things can also help you shape that customer journey and see how it's impacting the results.
Right. What would you say are capabilities that someone sitting in marketing need to have in order to roll out, you know, identity graph, or what are resources they could refer to? You know, I'm guessing there needs to be a certain qualification here, right?
Yeah. I think you need to have a multifunctional team, because ultimately you very rarely find someone who can multi-hat, right? You need to find someone who's very good at customer experience mapping. And yes, customer experience also includes the media side of things and how you're creating journeys. You need to have someone that's a good BC, a business consultant, to design the use cases. You need to have a very good data engineer. You know, when you start to put together these teams that have, let's say, different skill sets, you not only have someone that's designing the identity graph, but you have a couple of folks that can also help you use that identity graph in the best way possible. So I think from a marketeer perspective, you know, if you wanted to go down the non-technical route, you know, maybe work on creating some use cases or have that understanding of use cases. If you wanted to go down the route of actually being the marketeer that builds out this identity graph, then, you know, data engineering is the way.
Yeah.
So different skill sets will basically play different roles within the construction of the identity graph.
Right. And I have a feeling that there's a lot of scarcity in some of the qualifications that you've mentioned, region, right?
Yeah.
It's not straightforward. It's not obvious.
True.
You know, and this is one of the things I feel are slowing down or are holding back the region in really accelerating adoption in identity graph. Would you say perhaps these organizations need to outsource to companies abroad, to experts abroad, or are there any providers in the regions? Enough providers, and I also believe these are scarce as well here.
True. From a regional perspective, yes, leaning on expertise outside of the organization is always helpful. It gives you a fresh view on what you actually need as an org. So even if you were to do a discovery session internally, I'm sure there are questions you're going to miss, or you're going to be caught up into, excuse my French, but this is a reality in a lot of organizations, the politics of the organizations.
Yeah.
So why is this person from this department now asking me how I collect data? What do I do with this data? You know, sometimes an outside consultant comes in as a neutral third party and can help kind of uncover, put everyone at ease, make sure no one's stepping on other people's toes. Having a top-down approach that helps you kind of secure these resources, support these resources in the journey towards building that identity graph is really important.
Right.
But yeah, outside providers, SMEs, this is an area that needs to grow in the region. And who knows, maybe some of these conglomerates actually, you know, that do sell, I don't know, a restaurant visit or have a boutique, might find themselves also deciding to sell their data and entering the data business.
Right. Yeah.
In the States, like you can find out the number of people searching for black Adidas with pink shoelaces at any given moment. And actually finding that out across multiple touch points, multiple retailers does require, you know, independent third-party data brokers, identity graph creators that will help you get to this point where you can actually have a broader view of the market and you know what the opportunity is in that market.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I feel like a lot of organization would benefit from your expertise, Steve.
Thanks.
I don't think I know a lot of data engineers. I think they're you know, a substantial amount of data engineers, but a lot of data engineers I've encountered don't have the marketing I guess, knowledge and experience in order to put that data to work.
Yeah.
Right, towards a marketing, I guess, use case or solution.
100%. So you have very much, let's say, an SI mindset or a system integrator mindset. These are traditional technologists. They'll think technology first. But someone that kind of has a grasp on that, plus is able to bring the business lens and the marketing lens, that's the trifecta. Mm-hmm. That's where you're able to create personalization use cases, improve marketing ROI, improve measurability, and also build out business processes on top of the data set and make sure that the identity graph evolves over time to suit future needs as well. So
nice.
Yeah.
Okay, I hope my listeners and viewers have taken notes. If you haven't, you can just hit rewind, right? and listen again. No problem there. Steven, thanks so much.
No worries.
Any parting words?
I think everyone should, moving forward, wear their data hat. Right? There's a lot of talk of AI algorithms being the future.
Yeah.
But the foundation of what those, parts of AI or those algorithms actually sit on top of and actually understand from is data. And there's a reason why right before Reddit IPO'd, someone went out and bought Reddit's data for $60 million.
Wow. Yeah.
So there is a lot of value in data, and it is what's needed to actually fuel your organization into the future. And the organization that is going to be most successful is going to be the one that knows the data to ingest, knows what to do with that data, and actually drives business value from that data.
Okay. All right. Great. Good stuff.
Amazing.
Thanks, Steven. I'm glad we haven't mentioned AI once in this episode.
Only in the closing remarks.
Right now, yeah, that's it. Thanks, Steven.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Thank you. You too.
Thanks.